could a potential interest rate cut mean for your property plans? Well, in today's show, Brett Warren interviews Dr. Andrew Wilson and me regarding our thoughts about the potential for an interest rate cut, when that will come, and what it will mean for our housing markets and the economy. The three of us just recorded this roundtable discussion live, and I'm sure you're going to be impressed how Brett Warren peeled back the layers of what this could mean, not just for your wallet, but for the property landscape in general. And you may not be surprised that Dr. Andrew Wilson has slightly different views about what could be ahead than many other mainstream commentators. But given his strong track record, I think it's definitely worth listening to his views. So welcome to another episode of the Michael Yardney podcast, where we help investors gain clarity amongst the confusion of the many mixed messages regarding the property markets so that they can develop financial freedom they're looking for. Now, we know rate cuts are coming. We're just not sure when and how many. So let's dive into today's show and explore how the potential rate changes could open up new opportunities, what you should be looking for in the months ahead.
Welcome to the Michael Yardney podcast, where twice each week you will learn a number of new ideas regarding success, property investment and money in around 30 minutes. Our show is brought to you by Metropole, who specialise in helping you grow, protect and pass on your wealth through strategic property and wealth advice. Now here's your host, Michael Yardney, Australia's authority in wealth creation through property, who has been voted one of Australia's top 50 most influential thought leaders.
Hi, I'm Brett Warren from Metropole. Are you waiting for a sign? Well, the sign may be here because Westpac's come out and suggested that interest rate cuts are a live, option at the moment, and there's more to follow apparently. So to unpack some of this, because I know a lot of people are really interested, I've asked Michael Yardney to join me, founder of Metropole, and again, 5 decades of experience. And on the other side, I've got Dr. Andrew Wilson from My Housing Market, who also has probably 5 decades of experience.
Well, we don't want to say how many decades
on the economy to really unpack some of this and give you an insight as to what's likely to happen and what opportunities may lay ahead, because everybody's wondering. So to start off with, guys, Michael, I might get you to start. Just give us a general overview of how interest rates affect our property market.
Well, interest rates affect the property markets in a multifaceted way, but not what everyone thinks. For example, when interest rates started to go up in 2022, many commentators thought the market was going to slump, but it didn't. On the other hand, it's pretty well recognised that when interest rates fall, the property market starts to pick up for a number of reasons. First of all, mortgages are more affordable, and if people can borrow more, they tend to borrow as much as they can and spend up to their limits. But it's also going to bring confidence to borrowers because they're going to recognise that interest rates aren't going to creep up and they're going to get caught out with rising rates. It's also going to allow people who have got a mortgage to feel more comfortable. If interest rates fall a little bit, what they're going to do is maybe just be able to cope with their mortgage payments and the cost of living a little bit better. So in general, falling rates will increase confidence, increase buyer interest, and when buyers get into the market, well, many of them are sellers anyway, because they're upgrading and downgrading and right-sizing, so the market starts moving.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because you naturally think a rise in increase in prices, interest rates will affect property prices, but in fact it's been the opposite. And how about the economy, Andrew? Obviously a lot happening there, but how does that relationship kind of work?
Well, I think that's the context, Brett, for everything, is where when interest rates rise or fall, it's how the economy is performing. And that's the interesting environment we have now, because if we do cut rates, we're going to cut them with a very, very strong economy. And yet the previous occasions when we did cut rates, it was because we had a weakening or weak economy. So we're sort of heading into a different environment. So it's a bit
of uncharted territory.
It is always uncharted territory, because that's the nature of economics and human nature. But it's interesting that, you know, the very confident predictions of interest rate cuts imminent were very similar to those made 12 months ago.
Hold that thought. You've got a good point, Michael. What are the ABA looking for? What are they looking for before they cut rates? Have they been pretty, they've brought people in and told people what they're looking for, but I guess you could give us a quick rundown as what they're looking for before they cut rates.
Well, the Reserve Bank's mandated to keep our economy stable, keep unemployment low, but also keep inflation within its target range of 2 to 3%. Now, it's an interesting argument, is that still relevant today? But that's what their mandate is. So the Reserve Bank is going to want to make sure that inflation, which has been rampant for a number of years, is coming into their range, or should actually be in their range. But it's also going to make sure that the economy hasn't been stifled too much by the high rates we've had for a little while, and that unemployment isn't creeping up too much. Now, just with regard to the economy doing well, many people are saying, no, it's not, but we've created more jobs than we have. How many jobs have we created over the last?
Well, hundreds of thousands, Michael, over the last year or two, and it's been a tremendous result, given the fact that we've had a revisiting of migration, the gates are open again, and we're actually got record levels of participation. So we're dragging more people out of the potential workforce into the actual workforce. And that's because there's so many opportunities around. And also the number of jobless has been creeping downwards as well. So it's almost a sort of a perfect environment with a lower jobless rate. In fact, the jobless rate is as low as it was a year ago. And it's as low as it was during the great mining boom of the middle noughties. So it's a historically low unemployment rate, but it's the highest participation rate we've had on record. So it's inarguably a very strong economy, Michael.
That doesn't mean some people aren't suffering. People are suffering with the cost of living crisis or mortgage problems, but anyone who wants a job can get a job. But the other thing is that a lot of that's being driven currently by the government, by government jobs or government-related jobs rather than private industry, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, job's a job, isn't it? And that's the point, is we're bringing people into the workforce at record levels, whether they've been recently retired or self-employed, they're now finding positions in the workforce. And as I said, these are historically positive numbers in terms of our labour market, and it's very unusual or atypical to be cutting interest rates when we have such a strong economy, because when we look back to previous periods where we did cut rates, the economy was weak. The GFC in 2008, the end of the mining boom in 2012, and of course the COVID emergency period where we cut our rates to zero. They were when we cut rates, and it was because we needed to stimulate economic activity. And of course the jeopardy for the Reserve Bank here is if they cut rates during a period of strong economic activity, it will only refuel perhaps inflation as people spend that extra largesse they have through lower interest rates.
Well, that's the case, isn't it? Because we're probably equally on the same page here, Michael, where we probably feel that there will be an interest rate cut in the shorter term, but I'd like to bring Andrew in because he's always got a contrary view, and he's quite often right, isn't he, sometimes?
That's the problem. He's more often right than not.
I know. So he's kind of the black sheep of the economics world, but you're so much more right than all the others, and that's why we wanted to have you on.
Well, look, thank you very much.
For a contrary opinion, like I said, we're anticipating that there likely will be a rate cut, and certainly the media is pushing hard for one and other things, but you've got a contrary view?
Well, not necessarily. I don't generate interest rate changes. That's the Reserve Bank. And there's no doubt that the narrative from the Reserve Bank has become more flexible over the last 12 months. What they've clearly stated is that they'll be happy to ease interest rates overall if they feel that inflation is moving sustainably towards the target range. So that's not being in the target range sustainably, which was sort of the dogmatic view a year ago, is that we had to get to the target range, which is between 2 and 3%. And it was the midpoint of the target range, that was 2.5%. So basically it was, we have to get to 2.5%, we have to sustain that 2.5%, and that's underlying inflation as they measure it, and we have to, do that for some time. Now they're saying we're happy to think about cutting rates if we're actually moving towards that sustainably. Now, I don't quite understand what sustainably means in the context of an econometric measure. I can't find, a way to measure sustainability. That's right. There is none. But so they're really, they can say, well, we feel that we're moving. And when you look at the trend, yes, we could say that. But underlying inflation is still above 3%, 3.2%. And there are significant factors that have driven the fall in inflation that are sort of beyond the nature of the macroeconomy, and that was the government handout to electricity and the fall in international oil prices. You know, that's clearly been the catalyst to drive inflation down. Now, the Reserve Bank has said, you know, that we need to be happy that it's moving sustainably towards the target range. They've said that recently their confidence is growing that that's happening. So that's obviously a green light for saying, well, we're sort of happy that that's now occurring. And that, of course, is why many have said, yeah, well, we're going to get a cut in rates. And perhaps that really does signal we are going to get a cut in rates. But they've also said that risks remain and that they're alert to the risks. So what's happened since they made that statement, which was at their December meeting? And those risks are probably moving both ways, right? And I think that's what they have to decide at their next meeting, whether the risks have tipped the scales to continue their confidence that they're moving sustainably towards the target range, or else perhaps they need to wait another month or so before they do that.
I think you make a good point with regards to inflation, because that's what everyone's looking at, isn't it? But the point you've made about the jobs market and things like that, that's also something that is probably not being reported as much. So
yeah. But it's always a hot topic, isn't it? An interest rate change up or down, and of course it's driven by public sentiment, the media. And of course, we're not forgetting that it is an election year this year, and it would be a wonderful fillip for the Labor Party, the government, to get an interest rate cut
just before the election. Yep. Look, when interest rates do fall, is 25 basis points, one cut, going to make a difference, Michael, in terms of property investors? Is it going to make a difference to the property market?
It's going to make a difference in confidence. People have been waiting for it. This time last year, at the beginning of the year, the property market started to rise on the anticipation of interest rate falls. And then the narrative changed over the year. And I think once interest rates fall, buyers who've been sitting on the sidelines are going to start getting in. It's not going to make a huge difference to their borrowing capacity, but confidence drives markets, and buyer confidence increases first, and then they get in, but there's not sellers there yet. Most buyers are also sellers, so they've got to put their houses on the market, and then eventually seller confidence will improve. So I think it'll be enough to tip the market, because previous experience has shown that that occurs after a prolonged period of fixed rates. The first drop has, particularly in Sydney and then in Melbourne, also increased property values within a month or so. Again, just like after 2020, when we suddenly decided that COVID isn't going to kill us, buyer sentiment changed after the 2019 election. When buyer confidence changes, markets change very quickly.
Definitely. For the economy, will one interest rate cut make a substantial difference in any way?
Well, in real terms, no, of course, because it's a small cut. But, the first cut since the COVID emergency period sends a signal, that that there's an increased capacity for consumers to consume. But as I said, I'm not sure that on the balance of risks, the Reserve Bank, I think they're just on that button, but they're just not quite sure whether they're going to push the button next. Because since that last meeting, we could consider a couple of factors. Firstly, just last week, the US announced that it's put on hold its interest rate outlook, that it won't cut rates until it has unequivocal evidence that that's the way forward. And of course, last year the US cut its rates by 1.5%, and since then inflation has climbed back up again in the US, and their labour market is roaring along. And in fact, last year the US economy grew by almost a record amount. So it's a boom economy, the US. That's that sort of negative international sort of experience, and also we've seen inflation starting to rise in Europe as well. So I'm not sure Australia would want to be caught out as being, the odd country in terms of its, inflation view. And I think that's, inflation in Australia and the US are around about the same. But our interest rates are still higher than the US, So it's an interesting conundrum. Oil prices have just started to rise after falling over the last over the last week or so. But the other point is that the big cut in inflation has really come from the fall in electricity prices. Now that effect is starting to wane, obviously, because it was a one-off, and that's going to continue to have a moderating effect on inflation falling. So, you know, we could say, well, perhaps the government might be tempted to give us another handout in an election year for electricity, and that would just keep the ball rolling in terms of lower electricity prices, which would keep inflation down. Well, so, you know, perhaps the Reserve Bank would speculate on that, and they would think that, well, that's part of what we feel is sustaining this this downward fall. So it's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other, perhaps, to some degree. But as I said, it's unusual to have an interest rate cut with such an unequivocally strong economy. And we just have to look back to the historical experience to show that when we did cut rates after a period of steady rates, it was because the economy needed it per se and was struggling, rather than, you know, we'd sort of got back to our target range for inflation. So, I mean, the Reserve Bank would always say, okay, well, if it doesn't pan out, we'll just put rates up again, you know, so everybody be advised, you know, that we'll give you a rate cut, but if it doesn't pan out, we'll put them up again. But of course, the problem with that is it doesn't do a lot for their credibility, does it?
No, what you said, Brett, though, is what most people miss, that they think it's only inflation the Reserve Bank's looking at. The Reserve Bank is looking at the economy, unemployment, also what the Australian dollar is doing compared to overseas currencies, how it's going to affect our economy, our balance of trade. So it's not just inflation. So while even if inflation is coming under control, there could be other factors that make them just pause.
And I didn't want to bring it up, but I guess the Trump factor's there too.
Well, there's always the Trump factor.
And you know, that's what's happened also since the last meeting, is we've had, you know, Trump's activated his threats, if I could call them that, policies. You know, he's now certainly, you know, got the tariff hammer out, and he's throwing that around everywhere. But of course, if that does continue, and there's, you know, he's paused it at the moment, the tariffs would only be inflationary, you know, going forward. So that's another factor perhaps the Reserve Bank would be considering, that there's maybe some inflationary energy through what's happening in the international, you know, trading environment.
It'll be very interesting to see how that plays out. Michael, you mentioned before that there may be a window of opportunity here. So there's not one property market around Australia. There's obviously a lot of different markets. But do you sense that there's a window of opportunity at the moment? Because as you said before, if rates do come down, there's more confidence in the market. People put their house on, they're going to buy. So there's certainly a period there where there may be an opportunity.
Well, rates are going to come down. The question is when. And then how much they're going to come down. I don't think they're going to come down to the levels we've had in the past. In fact, it may only... some people are suggesting there's 2 interest rate cuts coming, others up to 5. But when they do come down, the market will pick up. So the window of opportunity lies in that if you can get in, if your finances are right, whether you're buying a new home or an investment, and you can afford it under the current environment, get in before the crowd, because when the market will turn, and it will eventually, when interest rates fall, whether it's at this meeting, in the May meeting, or later in the year, the market's going to pick up, prices are going to go up, and yes, you'll be able to borrow a little bit cheaper, but the properties you're buying will probably be more expensive, and you're going to have much more competition.
I completely agree. I think there's no need to go out and buy a property today, because it does take time to get there. So why not get your ducks in a row, get yourselves into it where you can. If rates do come down and you're comfortable and you're in the position to do so, it might be an ideal opportunity to strike rather than keep pushing it back. Andrew, I know you don't do a lot of forecasting, you have more expectations, but how do you see the market playing out over the next 12 months?
I think we're going to see another year of growth. Of course, 2022 was a year where we moved backwards, higher interest rates. We had 13 increases in interest rates, so no surprise the market moved downwards. Affordability was affected and confidence. But the market bounced back quite strongly in 2023, up 8% nationally, and last year another 7%. Now, you know, we have multiple market environments, and there's no doubt that Perth, Adelaide and Brisbane, you know, were boom time markets and are still very strong markets going forward. And I think even though Sydney looks like it's reached the peak of its cycle, and that's because affordability is constraining it, and Melbourne's been a sort of a bit of a strange underperformer, and I think Melbourne's a bit of an opportunists market because the Melbourne economy is doing okay.
Yeah.
I just think Melburnians have sort of, particularly mid to higher price sections of the Melbourne market, have sort of talked themselves into a negative mindset, and maybe a lower interest rate would be just the kick along it needed. But I still think there's, even, without an interest rate cut, around about a 5% growth in the national market this year, on the back particularly of Perth, Adelaide, not so much Adelaide, but Brisbane, and I think Sydney will continue to move along, not at the same rate perhaps as the last 2 years, and Melbourne may be looking for that spark. But if we do get an interest rate cut, I think we'll get the same sort of numbers as last year, because it will act to refuel fading housing markets, particularly Sydney, because affordability will be improved, in a very strong economy.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate your time. Hopefully that's given you an insight for your own personal situation, for what may happen next, and to seize this opportunity. We've got two experts here who have gone through 5 decades, sorry, Andrew, of experience in their various departments, and they can spot patterns in the chaos. And there's opportunity there at the moment. What are you going to do to take the next step? Why not have a chat with us today at Metropole, and we can help you put your ducks in a row. You don't have to buy a property today. That's not what we do. However, there's an opportunity to get your ducks in a row so we can take the next steps.
Well, I told you in the introduction that Dr. Andrew Wilson was going to give us some interesting thoughts, and I hope you got some insights into what could be ahead. Now, we don't know when interest rates are going to fall. We know they are going to, and we also know that there's going to be a number of interest rate drops over time. And in the past, or in general, when interest rates decline, the market tends to experience a surge in activity. Look, more buyers can afford larger loans, and as demand escalates, property prices often rise. Buyers who were previously priced out of the market start to re-enter the market, and those who were on the sidelines, they rush in to buy before prices climb too high. And this creates a snowball effect because there are more buyers but not enough sellers initially, and that drives up property values, and then sellers come into the market. However, the key takeaway is waiting for rates to drop might mean missing out. Throughout last year, despite relatively high interest rates in some areas, property prices grew at double-digit rates. Now, it doesn't matter when interest rates are going to fall. We know they are going to. So if you've got the right finances in place, I believe you should take advantage of the opportunity, the window of opportunity, because there are always markets within markets, and some areas are going to do a bit better than others. I see there is a window of opportunity, even if interest rates fall by the time you're watching this show or have a chat with my team about things, because it's going to be the beginning of the next phase of the cycle as we have a number of consecutive interest rate falls. See, we've got what I guess some people would call a perfect storm of factors that lead to strong property markets over the next couple of years. Continuing strong population growth, a shortage of skilled labour, massive housing shortage, inflation that's coming under control and is going to keep falling. So, as I said, if you want to take advantage of this window of opportunity to position yourself to buy your next home or an investment, I suggest that you have a chat with my team at Metropole. We're much more than buyer's agents. We help you safely outperform the property market by starting by giving you strategic property advice and then helping you implement that. So we have wealth advisory, property management, renovations, development, but it all starts by putting a strategic plan together for you to help you take advantage of the next stage of the property market, because this is the stage where significant wealth is being created for others. So as demand is going to continue to outstrip supply, why not take advantage, not of the people, but of if the market offers you an opportunity, take advantage of that. Go to metropole.com.au and have a chat with one of our wealth strategists. Just find a time that works for you and we'll be in contact. metropole.com.au.
Now here's Michael's mindset message. Remember, a change in your thinking will lead to a change in your life.
In my mindset session today, I'd like to talk to you about the donkey mindset. Look, there's this beautiful story about a donkey that falls into a well. You've probably heard it many years ago. One day an old donkey falls into a deep well and the farmer tries to figure out what to do, but decides, given the age of the animal and the dangers of a deep open well, the best course of action is to fill the well and just close it off. He begins to shovel dirt into the well. After several hours of work, the farmer's nearly done filling the well when suddenly, to his amazement, the old donkey leaps out of the dirt-filled well and trots off into a pasture. The farmer realises, rather than resigning itself to its fate, with each shovel of dirt that hit the donkey's back, the donkey just shook off the dirt and stepped up on top of it. As the farmer continued to shovel dirt into the well, the clever donkey used the dirt to get closer to its escape. I believe we can all embrace the donkey mindset. That's my mindset message for you today. There are going to be many moments in your life when life tries to beat you down, when nothing seems to work, when the world's shoveling dirt on top of you. You can either resign yourself to your fate, or you can shake off the dirt and use it to your advantage. You can use the dirt. Your greatest struggle can be your greatest asset. So, to finish this mindset message, let me just say, every single failure you experience, every single punch you take, every single blow you endure, use it. Adopt the donkey mindset. Thank you for spending the last little while with me. I hope you got some benefit from this show. But before you move on to the next podcast you're going to listen to, let me remind you I have another show that I produce once a week with leading demographer Simon Kirstenmacher. We call that Demographics Decoded, where Simon and I unveil the trends that are going to shape your future. In my mind, this is a must-listen to podcast for anyone interested in property investment, but also for business people and entrepreneurs. So if you don't currently subscribe to Demographics Decoded, just please stop for a second and subscribe on your podcast app where you're listening to this, or on YouTube. And of course, if you don't subscribe to this show, the Michael Yardney Podcast, why not click the link that says follow or subscribe wherever you're listening right now. So twice a week, you're going to get benefit from my guests and me. Oh, and I'd like to ask you a little favour, please. If you did enjoy today's show and you know somebody who would also benefit, please tell them about the Michael Yardney Podcast and Demographics Decoded. There's a share button on every podcast app. On Apple Podcasts, there are 3 little buttons at the top of the player. Or just tell them about it. Just have a chat with them. Now, I hope you're going to be doing them a favour, and you're definitely going to be doing me a favour in my quest to help as many people as possible to become financially literate. And by the way, I've got a special bonus for you. As my way of saying thank you for subscribing, just go to podcastbonus.com.au. There'll be a link in the show notes, podcastbonus.com.au, where I've got a bunch of ebooks and reports. It's just my way of saying thank you for taking the time to listen. And remember, the information that we give you in this podcast is general information, not specific information about your personal circumstances, because we don't know about them. But if you do want specific information, you can always have a chat with my team at Metropole. Go to metropole.com.au. If you really want to learn more, you can always listen to the previous podcast, the many episodes we've already published. Just go back to the old episodes, which each have lessons about property investment, success, and money. Once again, thanks for listening to today's show.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Michael Yardney Podcast, which was brought to you by Metropole, who help their clients grow, protect, and pass on their wealth through strategic property and wealth advice. If you like what you heard and don't already subscribe, you'll find us on iTunes or on your favourite Android app as the Michael Yardney Podcast. Watch out for our next show, which comes to you twice a week, and you'll learn some new ideas about property investment, success, and money in around 30 minutes. To get more of Michael's thoughts, go across to www.propertyupdate.com.au and sign up for his daily morning briefing, and you'll hear from not only Michael, but a group of leading property success and money experts. And just a reminder that the information you heard in this show today is general educational advice and not specific investment advice, as we don't know your personal circumstances. If you're looking for specific advice, why not ask the team at Metropole to help you?